Right, hello everybody, and yeah, it's been a long time, but I'm back, and I'm so pleased to be back because I've been itching to get back to making videos and doing videos, so it's fantastic to be back. So a special Instagram live, and well, one which is quite emotional for me. I mean, because today, after 23 years, sorry, not 24 years, brilliant run on BBC Radio 2, Steve Wright in the afternoon came to an end, and it was just, well, it's weird to think that he won't be on 2 till 5, every weekday afternoons, because for me, he's just always been there. Well, of course, there have been stand-ins like Chris Tarrant, Craig Charles, Al Murray, and most recently OJ Balls. Oh, Jord, great to see you. There you go, I waved to you. Now, I put out on Twitter that if you have any memories of listening to Wrighty on the radio, then I'd love to hear from you. So, what about if you use the hashtag farewell Wrighty, and that way I'll know that you're that's what you're talking about, and yeah, I'll try get to your comments. Sorry, just excuse me, got a bit of hairs on my trousers. Sorry about that. So the final song that Steve played, I mean, well, it couldn't have been better, could it? Queen's Radio Gaga, fantastic track, and it was a great show, like Steve said, it was a celebration, and I felt that it would have been nice to have a clip of the old woman who was so funny, and well, of course, she's been gone a good few years now. She died in 2016, and the old woman, well, she was sort of like, for those who don't know, sort of like the version of the Stig. No one knew who she was. She was just known as the old woman, until when she died, Steve revealed her as Joyce Frost from Dagenham. And yes, and she was just funny. Now, I don't like Will Smith, but as you know, of course, Steve and the team do factoids, and Will Smith did factoids with the old woman. It was quite funny, actually, something I really enjoyed. And yeah, for me, now obviously Steve is not the first, and he won't be the last, of course, because he's got Scott Mills coming in to take over that slot. And before him was Ed Stewart, a great DJ. But like Ed before him, and like Ed and, like Ed and Steve's shows were very different shows. So will Scott's. It definitely will not be the same show because they're two different styles. Steve Wright, if you listen to him, he often thinks he's an American disc jockey, doesn't he? And the whole format of having a posse, they call it a zoo format because, there's lots of people, comes from American radio. And Steve was actually one of the first ones who brought that really to the UK. Because for 12 years, of course, prior to him joining Radio 2, he was on Radio 1 and did Steve Wright in the afternoon on there. And but at least this time round, he's actually leaving in circumstances I think he'd be happier, because he left Radio 1 in not a very great way. Really, it's not the way he would have wanted the controllers and the big bosses, Trevor, Dan, and Matthew Bannister, who I'm sure you might remember and recall. Well, he's gone back into broadcasting now and depth for Jeremy Vine on his BBC Radio 2 show. In the, well, good few years now, he's not been on. Excuse me. Yeah, Steve was basically put on breakfast. And, you know, I don't think Steve felt it worked, really, because, really, for a breakfast show, you know, Steve's style of radio is very unique, but I don't think that it would suit a breakfast show. And Steve didn't feel that, and so after just, a year of it, he left. And funnily enough, Chris Evans took over from him on Radio 1 because that wasn't, Chris was there in a short stint before, but, he wasn't the star name that he would know. I mean, it was before the big breakfast. So, unless you watch TV or unless you listen to, I think he was on Timmy Mallet shows, I think. Very few people had heard of Chris Evans. And yeah, Chris took over the Radio 1 breakfast show, although we know how that ended. So yes, and if you can't watch the Instagram live, then don't worry, you can catch it up. If the video started, sorry about the delay. Just had a few technical issues, but eventually made it back there. I also thought it was very interesting for the final guests on Steve Wright in the Afternoon in its Radio 2 incarnation, at least, with actor Jason Statham and director Guy Ritchie. And it was very interesting because usually they would cut out all the, standing by and stuff, but they actually decided to leave it in, which I thought was very unique and actually very interesting because, admittedly, it's pretty silly to think, I know, but you think of interviews just as if you were generally chatting to someone. I guess, I don't think of people saying to someone, you're saying, stand by, and, but obviously I know interviews are not just a general chat. I mean, I'm not sure how the way is for, like, when people do Instagram lives, obviously, with people like Harpscore, former Asian Network presenter and CBBC Saturday Mashup. She just brought them in. Yes, it was a great show. There was some great music. Quarter Flash, Hard in My Heart, a favourite to Steve, clearly, because it's one of the only shows. Here we are. Sorry, I do apologise. It's funny. I'm all right, and then I do these Instagram lives, and then I start being tired. Sorry, I do apologise. Let me just get some water, because I can feel my voice going as well. Sorry about that. Just stay tuned. Right, there we go. So, now you may recall, of course, that Steve, his co-presenters are Tim Smith, Janie Lee Grace, and Bobby Pryor. And Janie Lee Grace doesn't usually appear on a Friday. Well, I imagine this was pre-recorded because she was only on for one bit. But it was great to hear her memories, and it would have been wrong for her not to be on the final show, really, of the Radio 2 incarnation. Because as Steve said, it's the last one for a while. So he's hinting that the show might, resurface somewhere. If it's on commercial radio, I don't think I'll listen. To be honest, I feel it was right for Steve to go. Steve is one of those broadcasters who, obviously is a legend and I respect him. And, he's a proper DJ because especially Radio 2 have a lot of celebrity DJs, if you like. Nobody could say, well, but aren't DJ celebrities? Well, yes, some of them are. But when I mean celebrity DJs, I'm meaning celebrities who have turned their hand to DJ, not, being DJs all their career, if you like. Radio 2's got Rylan, Rylan, Dermot O'Leary. Had Jessie Ware depping in for Joe. Jessie Ware depping in for Joe Wiley a couple of months ago now. Sophie Ellis Bextor, of course, with a kitchen disco show. So, there's lots of celebrity DJs, but Steve is definitely a proper, that's all he's done pretty much. Well, he has done a few bits of TV presenting, but he is mainly a radio man. And of course there was some serious jockeying today. And I was just thinking, I was looking around Twitter and, Zoe Ball put, serious, I can't remember what she put, but the pun, of course, as you know, if you listen to serious jockeying, is, serious mixing. For example, you're mixing a cake and, no G, it's funny because I've heard the presenters mention it, other presenters, on Radio 2, the other DJs mention it, and I'm thinking, that's when you've got a feature that is so big and so well known by loads and loads of people now. It's funny because now, of course, Steve has been going on Radio 2 for 23 years on the afternoon show, and of course there's factoids, there's always been the non-stop oldies and stuff like that, and to my knowledge I think the only thing that really has been mentioned by the other DJs is the non-stop oldies. I know when I used to listen to Jeremy Vine, I was never really interested in Jeremy Vine, but when I was waiting for Steve, because I used to listen to Steve quite a bit, but for me, the show was going downhill a bit, and 2014 onwards, really. Serious jockeying, I think, with him counting down to it, continuously plugging it, it did start to get on my nerves, and to be honest, I thought, right, I think it's probably time for Steve to go, or, I'll go. And then I came back to listening, obviously during lockdown, because I thought, I need music, I need radio, I need a bit of fun, and so that's what I did. And then obviously lockdown ended, and then the other lockdowns, and then obviously I came listening to Steve to sort of make the most of him while he was there. And, because he was going to be going soon. And, that's what I did. A lovely touch, if you remember, Steve used to close the show as his closing theme with Glenn Campbell's Witch's Alignment, the instrumental section that closes the song very appropriately. And that got me feeling emotional because, well, I don't remember that on Steve's show. I remember, obviously, the current closing theme, and there was another closing theme as well in between the one that he had been using currently and Witched Alignment. So I'm going to have to try. It was on YouTube, but I'm going to have to try dig that out. Really nice touch to go with the original closing theme. I mean, Witched Alignment is just one of those songs that is so great. I think it got me emotional because thinking about Glenn Campbell, he would have still been around, of course, when Steve started. And, of course, now the show's ending after 23 years. And there's quite a few people, when the show started, they're gone now. Dale Winton, fellow Radio 2 presenter, used to sit in for Steve quite a bit. And the non-stop oldies, I think, was You Pick the Pops, because he used to do Pick of the Pops. So that's what he sort of a repackaged non-stop oldies. Think of Dale Winton, Glenn Campbell. I was looking through the old episodes, Cilla Black as a guest, she's not here. It's quite scary to think that, the show has been going so long, and celebrities that were around for the start of it, and here we are, all these years later when the show's ended, and they're all gone. But I suppose that's just an indication of how long Wrighty and his team have gone on. And it's very interesting. Steve says he's had offers to do things on stage and TV and stuff. And the funny thing is, Steve did Top of the Pops for many years. I know he did Top of the Pops too, which we didn't see him, but he did actually do Top of the Pops, and he did The People's Show, which we did see him. Yes, he does seem to be camera shy, which I can't really understand when you've done so much. Well, maybe he never liked being on camera, but of course, Top of the Pops is a great way to... Well, suppose he maybe did it for, an extra paycheck. Or, well, I don't know. But maybe Steve will end up doing some TV. Although, like I say, I think he's a radio man, really. And, he'll probably end up on another station. But as Steve said, he will be still doing love songs every Sunday from 9 to 11. And from the 4th of November, Serious Jocking will return in a new podcast form. But people can still email, I think, seriousjocking@bbc.co.uk. So if you want to email that, and email Steve and tell him where you are listening, what you're doing when you're listening to the show, and of course you know G puns. So if you want to get involved in that, then I think I'll just check, but I think the email is seriousjocking. It'll be all one word, seriousjocking@bbc.co.uk, and who knows, maybe you'll get your email read by Steve. And of course, Serious Jocking won't be live. It used to be live because it used to be part of the Steve Wright in the afternoon, but it won't be. It's going to turn up every Friday morning, just as you wake up, as Steve said in in a little 5-minute preview. There's some really good songs today, and also the factoids were. It was actually very interesting to hear factoids about the show itself, about Steve Wright in the afternoon, and I thought that was really, really good. I would have loved it, to be honest, if Janie had played, a part still in the factoids in the show today. But I don't know what she does Fridays. I think she's got another. Oh, she has got another business, hasn't she? That she does, and she has another podcast, and she does all sorts of other things. So maybe she wasn't available, but still, at least good that she could be part of the final show. And you may remember, if you listened to the show at the start of the 90s, you may remember that Steve also had Richard Easter, who's a writer. And in fact, Steve actually name-checked him when he was thanking a lot of people, sort of responsible over the years. And great to hear his, thanking Jim Moyer, who, not Vic Reeves, but former light entertainment boss at the BBC and former Radio 2 controller. And he said to him when Steve joined Radio 2, this would have been 1996, Jim was controller then, whatever you do, Wrighty, don't frighten the horses. And just a really, really great story. As I said, two feelings about it. One, he's just always been there, a constant, but also it is his time to go. I think he's like Tim Smith, his co-presenter said, they have had an amazing run. They have. They've had a really fantastic run. Obviously, Scott Mills is going to be different, as I said, to Steve, as was Ed Stewart before Steve. The interesting thing, and they said on the factoids, that you could win a Steve Wright in the afternoon umbrella, but apparently it wasn't good because Steve used to run this feature, and I don't remember it, called The Big Quiz, and it was carried on from a remnants of, it was the only element from Ed Stewart's show, his predecessor, I guess to sort of just keep something familiar to Stew Pot's listeners. And then what happened was the BBC, there was a huge phone-in scandals about fake details. I can't remember the full details, but it was a huge scandal. So the big quiz got taken off, and then they decided, we don't need it actually. There's plenty of other features. So and that was that. I mean, it would have been nice to see the return. It would have been nice for the return of the big quiz for the final week. It would have been great to have like a good final week of, the big quiz and, maybe Miles Mendoza, who used to do the website of the month or week, would have been nice that. But I guess Steve wanted it just to be normal until the final show, and Ken Bruce said he didn't want Steve didn't want people mentioning his final show, although funny as you said, it's actually been on the schedules for a couple of weeks. But I guess Steve doesn't really want all the fuss. And the great thing about the factoids actually that they did on the final show was Steve didn't actually know what was in them. So it was the production team who prepared them. So that was very interesting and a nice twist to it. And I'm going to be listening to Scott Mills' new show. Obviously, it's no different to Radio 2. So it's no stranger, to Radio 2. His depth for Ken Bruce, which in my view, he doesn't suit that show. He's done specials on Neighbours and Dynasty and stood in for Rylan as well, and he's done quite a bit actually. And he had, sorry, I bet this is where the confusion for me was, because Scott spent 24 years at Radio 1. Yeah, that's where I got the confusion wrong. So yes, Scott will be taking over from, I think, the 31st of October, and it's going to be a 2-hour show instead of the 3-hour show. Sarah Cox's show is going to be extended to 3 hours. So my guess would be Sarah will have guests, while Scott won't. Scott will be more about the listeners, which Steve's show, yes, there was listeners, but a big thing about Steve's show has always been the guests, hasn't it? So after all, Helen Thomas told him, the head of Radio 2, that she wanted to try something different. And people have been saying, well, yeah, but, Scott Mills, he's not. But, yeah, it will be a different type of show. It'll be interesting, I think, won't it, to see, will the show do well? I mean, if Scott's show tanks, have they got a backup plan? Because, Simon Mayo co-presenting with Joe Wrighty, and they didn't really have any backup plan because they thought that was actually going to work, and they thought listeners would get used to it, but they didn't really. Simon was unhappy, and I think he shocked Radio 2 by quitting, although, well, the cynical me says that they put Joe with him. Now, I love Joe Wrighty. I think she's absolutely fantastic at new music, and, that's her speciality, new music, and sometimes stuff off the radar, really, if you like. But, the thing is with Drive Time, it's just, she never suited that show for me, and her and Simon, it just didn't work. And the cynic says in me that Simon, they did that, and then they think Simon would put up with it and he would leave Radio 2. It's actually interesting because I never heard any of Ed Stewart's afternoon show. And if you say to me Ed Stewart, Pop Stewart, I think of Junior Choice, really. So the idea of him doing, an afternoon show, I might have to dig some of them out on Mixcloud and stuff and listen to them. Obviously, I know he'd be very, very different from Steve Wright. Because, yeah, like I said, Steve does the Zoo format. Ed doesn't. So, yes, it's... Radio 2 is interesting, On the other hand, it's a great station, it really is, and I love listening to it. But on the other hand, it's so frustrating where I think the direction is going. There's so much 90s stuff now, and this is what bothers me, right? We have Sounds of the 90s with Third Concert. That didn't bother me. That made sense with Sounds of the 60s, 70s, 80s. That was always going to happen. I didn't mind that. And, okay, I didn't listen to the show, but at least I could understand why they introduced that. I thought, yeah, that makes sense. Then we had alternative Sounds of the 90s with Dermot O'Leary, which I thought, well, why have we got that and not... Why have we got that and just Sounds of the 70s, Sounds of the 60s, but yet 2 programmes for the 90s? And then we got Dance Sounds of the 90s. I'm thinking... But what's the point? Fern, could easily play those in Sounds of the 90s. Sophie Ellis-Bextor, as I said, have got a kitchen disco show. She could play them. And I just think... I don't know whether Helen Thomas was, sort of a 90s kid and, not helped by her. But, yeah, I just think Radio 2 is not going in a great direction. What's been quite surprising is actually, I thought they were just changing the week. Oh, sorry. I think that was my iPad. What's surprising is the amount of schedule changes that, has happened in a year, really. Right, sorry, just new reels. Because at first we had the weekend schedule changes, so Craig Charles and Arnold Mechanic and Dr. Ron Chastity making way for Angela Griffin and DJ Spoonie. So I thought, okay, right, yeah, that's interesting. And then the other things like Paul O'Grady, Paul O'Grady leaving wasn't surprising. But Vanessa Phelps' departure, who I never really liked anyway, to be honest, she's never been my cup of tea at all. I really just don't like her. What was so surprising is Steve, announcing that he was going to be leaving. That came out of the blue as well, because, there was no warnings, no hints, Unlike Craig Charles saying, well, I missed this, even though I listened to the show. I missed this, and Craig said, because, it was his 6th anniversary of the house party, and someone sent him an email, well, congratulations, and hopefully there'll be, many more, another 6 years. And Craig said, well, there isn't but more news on that shortly. So there was a hint there. But with Steve, this just absolutely came out of nowhere. And if I'm honest, I would have given Steve a couple more years. He's so close to hitting the 25-year mark, doing the Steve Wright in the afternoon on Radio 2. Get into that year, get him Christmas through that year, and then let him bow out. But obviously Helen Thomas has decided she wants to refresh that, and but I do wish Scott well, and I think Radio 2 have done the right thing, because I think you've got to ease a DJ in. Steve was kind of eased in because he was brought in initially to do love songs, but also what is Claudia Winkleman's Saturday morning slot, actually. Steve did that show before Jonathan Ross did it. So he did that and love songs, and then in 1999, Jim Moyer took Ed Stewart off afternoons, and Steve Wright in the afternoon on Radio 2 began 5th of July 1999. So Steve was eased in. Scott Mills, the same, because, well, the first thing, I think he stood in for Rylan. I think he stood in for Claudia as well during 2019. And then he, did a few, did the Neighbours special, did the Dynasty special, sat in for Steve Wright as well. Only once, I think. Not many times, but yeah, clearly has been very, stood in for Ken, of course, so has been eased in. And of course he did the Steve Mack, pop producer Steve Mack documentary as well. So, they've done the right thing, and obviously, it's going to be hard at first for Steve's audience, because it's not going to be the same show. Steve and Scott are two completely different styles. But, it's going to be interesting, like Stephen, inherited the big quiz. Will Scott keep at least what. The only thing I could see him retaining would be the oldies, maybe, if anything was to stay. But no, I think it's going to be a different show. What's actually going to be interesting is Steve Wright in the afternoon is it's an in-house production. Scott, I believe his Radio 1 and Radio 5 live shows are done by an independent company, Banana Stand. So, unlike Steve and his team, when they're all off, it's, well, you would think, wouldn't you, with an independent production company and all the team off, that you would do a different show and not all the features, and it would be a different team covering because all the team are literally off. But I'm wondering if whenever Scott's off his show, if it's a production company, whether whoever's standing in will do exactly the same show, exactly the same features. So it's going to be interesting. Obviously, if Scott's starting on the 31st of October, he's not going to be off till, well, probably, the Christmas period, really. And to be honest, look, I always saw Scott coming to Radio 2 permanently. That was always obvious. That was going to happen at some point. What surprised me, actually, the most shock, I thought Chris Stark was going to come with him. I did think he was going to take over afternoons, but I thought Chris Stark would come with him. But no, Chris is heading to Capital, and he's still doing that Peter Crouch podcast, which, George, I know you like. So Chris isn't joining him, but it's going to be interesting whether Scott, because, well, Radio 1, his producers contributed, spoke on air a bit. There's a producer called Becky, who had to leave the show due to ill health. It's not that there's no cure from it. I think it's multiple sclerosis, but Becky did manage to be. Well, I don't know if it's obviously there's something to at least just control this, but she was well enough to appear on Scott's final Radio 1 show, because I thought, well, I don't usually catch up, and I don't usually listen to anything from Radio 1, but I thought, this is a big moment, 24 years, one of the longest serving modern DJs is leaving. And, the fact that I knew who Scott was, I enjoyed his 5 Live show with Chris Stark, and listened to him on Radio 2 as well. So I thought, let's give the show a listen. I did roll my eyes at the inclusion of Christina Aguilera's Beautiful. Because for those of you who know me personally, I will never be doing an album review by her. That's one of the only artists I will say, no, I'm sorry. I really would rather rip my ears out than her, in my opinion. I really, really just detest the sound of it, just the thought of her voice. Oh, talking of album reviews, though, it won't be long till Betty Boo's new album out. In fact, I saw a video for it with Chuck D. One of the tracks, I think it's called Miracle, Chuck D from Public Enemy. I had to look him up, actually, because all the other David Gray, obviously new, and Sophie Ellis-Bextor is on the album as well, on a bonus track. Some very interesting collaborations, particularly David Gray. Chuck D, obviously, rap, which Betty Boo does. Sophie Ellis Bextor. Betty Boo seems to be going in a sort of disco direction. I mean, she said if you follow her, I do recommend you follow her because she does seem like a really fun person to follow, and her laugh is just absolutely fantastic. And yeah, she does seem like a really great person. You might have seen her with the Love Unlimited Synth Orchestra paying tribute to the late great Barry White. So she seems to be going in a bit of a disco direction in a song "Shining Star," which that's the bonus track. Well, there's two versions. There's a solo version, and then the bonus track is a duet with Sophie Ellis Bextor. So yeah, I'm going to be reviewing that album because I like Shining Star. I've only heard the solo version, and I like. I think I'm going to like a lot of the tracks, actually. But, well, we'll see. It comes out 10th October, so that is next Friday, actually. Yeah, next Friday. And, well, yeah, it depends. Is the album going to drop midnight on Friday? In that case, I can just get it done. To be put out late on Friday. Usually, admittedly, I like to do videos on Saturdays because I just love Saturdays. But it's a new album, and I thought I'd love to have it on the day of the new album because imagine you're listening to the new album and you've got a companion. You know, you've got something to go with it. Because I tried to do ABBA Voyage on its opening day. For some reason it didn't happen, but I would love to get Superstar, Betty Boo, and also, you know, it's a big musical comeback, you know. Well, both those albums, I mean, ABBA, who would have thought they would be back with new music, but also Betty Boo as well, who's, you know, apart from one or two things, has been away as well. So, yeah, that'll be next Friday. And, yeah, there's so many other great stuff. Right, well, nearly coming up to midnight. Thanks so much for watching. Like I said, if you haven't been able to watch the live, then you can catch this up. And, yeah, if you put the hashtag Farewell Wrighty, and you know, if you have any, you know, thing that, you know, memories of listening to Steve, or maybe you like That's Elvis, The Old Woman, the Factoids, the Non-Stop Oldies, Serious Jockeying, then yeah, I'd love to hear from you. And are you going to listen to Scott Mills? How are you feeling about the show ending? Do you think it's time for Steve to go? Would you have kept him on if you were head of Radio 2? You know, like I said, it'd be great to hear from you. And, yeah, just drop in the comments below. When this video is up. And, yeah, maybe I'll see you. And then, yeah, in fact, I might do a video when I read your comments. So, yeah. But anyway, Superstar, Betty Boo's new album, it's going to be coming, and yeah, that's going to be absolutely fantastic. Right, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Very good night. Bye-bye.